Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. The August heat in Dallas was merciless, the kind that makes asphalt shimmer like water and turns car interiors into ovens. I'd borrowed Becky's silver Honda Civic to drive out to Home Depot for those patio chairs we'd been discussing for months, part of her ongoing mission to make our Richardson backyard more entertaining-friendly, as she put it. To make the drive bearable, I tuned into This American Life on NPR, letting Ira Glass's measured voice compete with the struggling air conditioner as I navigated the sprawl of North Texas suburbs. A guest on the program mentioned a book that caught my attention, something about human psychology and hidden motivations. The title was slipping away from me even as I heard it, forcing me to fumble around the center console with one hand while keeping the other on the wheel, searching for something to write on among the accumulated debris of Becky's daily commute. My fingers sifted through the usual car archaeology, crumpled Sonic receipts, a half-used Starbucks gift card, loose quarters that had escaped from cup holders, an old folding comb she kept meaning to throw away. Then they landed on something that made my blood freeze in the 100-degree heat. A small foil package, unmistakable in its purpose and implications. The steering wheel slipped in my suddenly sweaty palms, and I drifted toward the center line before jerking back into my lane. A red Silverado roared past, its driver, a woman with fiery auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, shooting me the kind of look reserved for distracted idiots who shouldn't be behind the wheel. I forced myself to focus on the road ahead, watching the speedometer needle hold steady at 34 mph, while dust particles danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the windshield. Each mote a reminder of time passing, of moments I couldn't get back. The approaching traffic light promised forward motion, but I felt paralyzed in place, suspended between disbelief and a growing certainty that everything I thought I knew about my life was about to change. Dead insects dotted the windshield, evidence of countless trips where I'd trusted without question, loved without reservation. When I reached for a CD case to write the book title on, its sharp plastic edge caught my wrist, a small sting that somehow grounded me back to the devastating present. Have I ever asked myself whether this belongs to me? The question hit like a physical blow, reverberating through my skull with each heartbeat. When was the last time Becky and I had even needed protection? The thought made me nauseous. We'd been trying to conceive for over a year, following doctors' advice about timing and positioning and folic acid supplements. The irony was so sharp it could have cut glass. Confusion settled over me like the Texas humidity. Thick, oppressive, impossible to escape. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions. Maybe there was some innocent explanation I couldn't see yet. Maybe I was the one losing his mind, not the faithful husband whose trust was about to be shattered into irreparable pieces. I pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall, the kind of anonymous collection of businesses that dots every suburb in America: dry cleaner, nail salon, insurance office, places where people conducted the mundane business of their lives while their personal worlds collapsed in Honda Civics under the blazing sun. What followed was the most thorough search I'd ever conducted, turning my wife's car into a crime scene with myself as both detective and victim. I started with the obvious places: glove compartment yielding only registration papers and expired insurance cards, door pockets containing nothing but tissues and lip balm. But desperation breeds thoroughness, and I found myself examining every crevice, every hidden space where secrets might hide. Under the passenger seat, wedged behind the metal frame and wrapped in a plastic HEB grocery bag, my fingers found what would become Exhibit A in the case against my marriage. A small spiral-bound notebook, the kind students use for class notes, innocuous except for what it contained. My hands trembled as I opened it, heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape the coming devastation. The first 2 pages were blank, teasingly innocent, offering false hope that maybe this was just an unused journal, a forgotten reminder of good intentions to organize our lives better. Then came the pages that would haunt every sleepless night for months to come. 4/27 height 135 above. 5 halves, Chi 1156 TL 1511 TL2. May 7th, Comfort 2:42 p.m. May 11th, Holiday East 127. 32 entries spanning 4 months, each cryptic but following a pattern I was beginning to recognize with sickening clarity. Every 4 to 5 days, like clockwork. The dates corresponded perfectly with my business trips, inspections of construction sites across Texas and Oklahoma, 3-day journeys that took me to Austin, San Antonio, Tulsa, leaving Becky alone in Richardson with time to fill and apparently someone to fill it with. The last entry was dated tomorrow, August 29th, Comfort Airport 1:30. One entry had been crossed out with angry black ink. The day I'd gotten food poisoning from questionable gas station sushi and stayed home instead of driving to the Houston project site. The day whatever had been planned got disrupted by my unexpected presence. The pattern became undeniable. My schedule, my absences, turned into opportunities for clandestine meetings. Holiday Inn East, Comfort Suites by the airport, places I'd stayed myself during business trips, never imagining they were also hosting my wife's secret life. The heights and numbers probably referred to room locations, the times to rendezvous points that had been operating under my nose for 4 months. That small foil package suddenly made perfect, terrible sense, evidence of planning, of consideration for consequences I'd never been asked to contemplate. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a single lapse in judgment. This was systematic, calculated, methodical in its deception. The realization hit me like a collapsed scaffold, threatening to bury me under the weight of what I discovered. For months of, "How was your day, honey?" over dinner while she sat across from me planning her next betrayal. For months of bedtime kisses that tasted like lies. For months of me calling her from lonely hotel rooms to tell her I missed her, while she was probably planning which hotel room to meet her lover in next. I sat in that parking lot, air conditioning running at full blast, trying to process the magnitude of my wife's deception. Part of me wanted to drive straight home and confront her, to scream and demand explanations and throw her notebook in her face. But a larger part knew I needed certainty, needed to see it with my own eyes before I destroyed everything we'd built together over 8 years of marriage. The drive home passed in a blur of familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Everything looked the same, the Taco Bell where we'd had our first date, the movie theater where we'd seen our first film together, the Kroger where we grocery shopped every Saturday morning. But the context had changed, turning our shared geography into a landscape of lies. That evening, as Becky graded second-grade math tests at our kitchen table, her red pen marking student mistakes while hiding her own transgressions, I delivered the performance of my life. Normal husband, trusting spouse, the man who still believed his wife's explanations for working late, for needing time with girlfriends, for being tired in the evenings. "How was your day, sweetie?" she asked without looking up from a stack of papers covered in crooked numbers and eraser smudges. Her blonde hair falling across her face in the way that had charmed me since our days at UTD. Good. Productive. The Morrison site is finally back on schedule. The lie came easily, probably because I'd been living with lies for months without knowing it. How about you? Still dealing with behavioral issues in your class? Billy Martinez threw another tantrum during story time, and Sarah's parents want yet another conference about her reading level. She glanced up with that familiar smile that had once been my compass, the expression that told me I was home. Sometimes I think I care more about these kids' education than their own parents do. That's what makes you such a good teacher? I said, marveling at how normal my voice sounded while my world crumbled around us. The kids are lucky to have you. She beamed at the compliment, and for a moment I almost forgot about the notebook hidden in my briefcase upstairs, the evidence that would soon make moments like this impossible. This was still Becky, the woman who cried during romantic movies, who brought me soup when I was sick, who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and made it perfectly every morning without being asked. She was also a stranger who'd been conducting a 4-month affair while I trusted her completely. I retreated to my home office, claiming I had blueprints to review for tomorrow's meeting. Instead, I stared at architectural drawings without seeing them, trying to reconcile the woman discussing student progress in the kitchen with the one who'd been meeting someone at hotels while I was out of town. That night, she came to bed at her usual time, 10:30, after finishing her lesson plans and setting out clothes for tomorrow's classes. She slipped under the covers with the casual intimacy of 8 years together, her body warm and familiar against mine. "You seem distracted tonight," she said, her hand finding mine under the sheet. "Everything all right?" "Just thinking about work stuff. The Henderson project is behind schedule, and the client's getting antsy." She made sympathetic noises and curled against me like she had thousands of times before, her breathing eventually settling into the rhythm of sleep. I lay awake until dawn, listening to her breathe, studying the ceiling and trying to figure out how to proceed. By morning, I'd made my decision. I left early the next day, telling Becky I had a site meeting in Fort Worth that would keep me busy until evening. Instead, I drove to the Comfort Suites near DFW Airport, a mid-tier business hotel that catered to travelers and apparently provided the discretion my wife's affair required. The hotel sat in one of those anonymous commercial districts that cluster around major airports, chain restaurants, extended stay hotels, office parks housing companies no one's ever heard of. The kind of place where people conducted business they'd rather not have noticed, where anonymity came standard with the room rate. The front desk clerk was a young man in his early 20s, name tag reading Marcus, with the slightly glazed expression of someone working the day shift at a job that barely paid for community college. He looked up from his computer screen as I approached, his professional smile fading as he registered whatever expression I was wearing. "Good morning. Can I help you?" I'd rehearsed this conversation during the drive, but standing there in the bland hotel lobby with its generic artwork and piped-in music, I felt exposed and desperate, like a man who'd lost his way and was asking strangers for directions home. "This is going to sound strange," I began, "but I think my wife is meeting someone here today around 1:30. I have reason to believe she's having an affair, and I need to know who she's seeing." Marcus's expression shifted from professional courtesy to uncomfortable wariness, the look of someone who'd suddenly found himself in the middle of domestic drama he wasn't paid enough to handle. "Sir, I can't. I'm not asking you to break into rooms or violate anyone's privacy," I interrupted, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "I just want to see the security footage. With you present, of course. I need to know the truth about what's happening in my marriage." Something in my voice, desperation, maybe, or the particular kind of pain that comes from loving someone who stopped loving you back, seemed to get through to him. Marcus glanced around the empty lobby, then back at me with something approaching sympathy. "Look, man, I really can't officially help you with this kind of thing," he said quietly. "Hotel policy is pretty clear about guest privacy, and I could get fired for showing surveillance footage to unauthorized people." My heart sank. "I understand. But," he continued, "if you happen to be sitting in our lobby seating area, and if someone accidentally left the security monitor positioned where it might be visible from certain angles, and if you happen to be looking in that direction when certain guests arrived," he shrugged. "I can't control what guests see while they're sitting in public areas of the hotel." "Thank you," I said, meaning it more than he could possibly know. "I didn't do anything," Marcus replied, but his eyes said otherwise. "You want some coffee? It's going to be a long morning, and you look like you could use it." We fell into awkward small talk as the hours crawled by, two strangers bound together by circumstance and the approaching revelation that would change my life forever. Marcus told me about his night classes at Dallas Community College, his dreams of becoming an IT specialist, his girlfriend who worked at the Barnes Noble in North Park. I found myself sharing stories about construction projects, the satisfaction of watching buildings rise from empty lots, the way architectural problems had solutions if you just thought about them long enough. Under different circumstances, we might have become friends. As it was, we were co-conspirators in the unraveling of my marriage, watching the clock approach the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life would be proven wrong. At 12:50, Becky's silver Honda pulled into the far corner of the parking lot. Even through the grainy security monitor, I could see her clearly. My wife of 8 years, the woman I'd promised to love and cherish until death do us part, sitting in her car and talking on her cell phone with animated gestures. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror multiple times, running her fingers through her blonde hair in that nervous habit I'd found endearing since our college days. She was wearing the blue sundress I'd complimented that morning over breakfast, the one that brought out her eyes and made her look like the graduate student I'd fallen in love with at UTD. "You look beautiful," I told her as she grabbed her lunch from the refrigerator. "Have a great day at school." At exactly 1:30, a blue BMW pulled up beside her Honda. The man who emerged was tall and lean, with brown hair and the confident stride of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. Even before he turned toward the camera, I knew who it was. The recognition hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making the generic hotel lobby spin around me. David Walsh, my best friend since 2nd grade. The guy who'd stood beside me at my wedding, who'd thrown my bachelor party, who'd been there for every major moment of my adult life. David, whose wife Jennifer was one of Becky's closest friends, whose house we visited for barbecues and Cowboys games, who called me brother and meant it. I watched my wife step out of her car, smoothing down the sundress I'd admired hours earlier. David said something that made her laugh, that bright, genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months, then slipped his arm around her waist with casual intimacy that spoke of practice, of comfort, of a relationship that had grown beyond furtive meetings and guilty kisses. They walked toward the hotel entrance like any couple checking in for a romantic getaway, her hand resting on his forearm, his head bent close to hers as he murmured something that made her smile. The lobby door chimed as they entered, and I forced myself to look down at a magazine. Some architectural digest that might as well have been written in ancient Greek for all the sense it made through my shock. "Checking in for Walsh," I heard David say to Marcus, his voice carrying the easy confidence that had made him popular in school, successful with women, and apparently irresistible to my wife. "Room 247. Marcus handed over a key card without meeting anyone's eyes, probably wondering how this moment felt for me, watching my marriage end in a hotel lobby while music played overhead and business travelers wheeled luggage toward elevators that would carry them to affairs and meetings and all the small betrayals that make up adult life. Becky and David walked past me toward the elevator bank, so close I could smell her perfume, the same Calvin Klein fragrance I'd bought her for her birthday 3 months ago. Her wedding ring caught the lobby lights as her hand briefly touched David's back, and for a surreal moment I wondered if she ever thought about the vows we'd made while she was breaking them. The elevator doors closed with mechanical finality, carrying them to room 247 and whatever intimacies they'd planned while I was supposed to be inspecting foundation work in Fort Worth. I sat frozen in that lobby chair, surrounded by the mundane sounds of hotel life, phones ringing at the front desk, the ice machine humming, the distant rumble of housekeeping carts being pushed down carpeted hallways. A family with small children checked in at the front desk, the father counting out credit cards while the mother corralled toddlers who wanted to explore every corner of the lobby. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that someone else's world was ending 20 feet away. "You okay, man?" Marcus asked quietly during a lull in lobby traffic. I wasn't okay. I might never be okay again, but I nodded and thanked him for his discretion, for his kindness to a stranger whose life had just been revealed as an elaborate lie. There was nothing left to see here. The proof was upstairs in room 247. My wife and my best friend, 2 people I'd trusted completely, creating memories that would poison every shared experience we'd ever had. I didn't need to witness the details. My imagination was vivid enough, and some images can't be unseen. I drove aimlessly through Dallas for the next 2 hours, past construction sites where I'd spent countless days building things meant to last forever. The irony wasn't lost on me. I created permanent structures for a living, while my personal life crumbled like concrete mixed with too much water, weak at the foundation and doomed to collapse. Eventually, I found myself at Topgolf in Addison, mechanically swinging at ball after ball, trying to drive away the images playing on repeat in my head. For brief moments, when I connected perfectly and watched the ball arc toward its target in a clean, predictable trajectory, I felt something approaching peace. But it never lasted longer than the ball's flight, and then I was back to the reality of David's hand on Becky's waist. Their easy intimacy. The way they'd walked into that hotel like they belonged together. Around 4 o'clock, I called David's house in Plano. Jennifer answered on the third ring, her voice carrying the warmth that had made her such a natural addition to our friend group when she and David started dating 10 years ago. "Hey Mike, how are you doing? David's still at the station, but I can have him call you when he gets home. Actually, I was calling to see if you and David wanted to grab dinner tonight. Becky and I were thinking about Smoky Joe's around 7. "Oh, that sounds perfect. We haven't been there in forever. The brisket there is incredible. Should we meet y'all there? Or do you want to ride together? Let's just meet there. 7 o'clock work. Perfect. I'll tell David when he gets home. Thanks for thinking of us." I hung up and immediately called our house, leaving a message on our answering machine. "Hey babe, it's me. Change of plans. I'm getting back to town earlier than expected. I set up dinner with David and Jen at Smoky Joe's at 7. Hope that works for you. Love you." The word love felt like swallowing broken glass, but I forced it out anyway. One last performance before the curtain came down. Then I called Becky's cell phone, knowing she wouldn't answer while she was occupied. "Hi, you've reached Becky's voicemail. I'm probably in class or grading papers, so leave me a message and I'll call you back as soon as I can." The cheerful recording made me want to throw my phone through the windshield. Instead, I left another message. "Hey, sweetie, just wanted to make sure you got my message about dinner. Smoky Joe's at 7 with David and Jen. See you there. Love you." By 6 o'clock, I was back home in Richardson, listening to Becky humming in the shower, slightly off-key, the way she always did when she was in a particularly good mood. Her gym bag sat conspicuously by the bedroom door, though I knew she hadn't been to any gym. Everything felt like evidence now. The timing, the bag, the way she sang in the shower like someone who'd spent the afternoon being thoroughly satisfied by someone who wasn't her husband. I found myself examining those workout clothes with the clinical detachment of a crime scene investigator, looking for signs of guilt that weren't there. Just ordinary athletic where that smelled of her usual body wash and the lingering traces of unfamiliar cologne that might have been David's, or might have been my imagination running wild with suspicion. "Hey, honey," she called from the bathroom, her voice bright with post-adultery euphoria. "I got your message about dinner. Perfect timing. I was just thinking I didn't want to cook tonight, and I've been craving Smoky Joe's brisket all week. Great minds think alike." I called back, marveling at how normal I sounded while my entire world shifted on its axis. When she emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, wrapped in her favorite towel with her hair damp and curling at the edges, I felt a complicated mixture of love and revulsion that made my stomach churn. This was still Becky. Still the woman who'd cried during our first dance at the wedding, who made perfect coffee without being asked, who knew exactly how to make me laugh when I was stressed about work. She was also a stranger who'd spent the afternoon in bed with my best friend, while I sat in a hotel lobby watching my life disintegrate in real time. "You seem quiet tonight," she said, sitting at her vanity to blow dry her hair. "Everything go okay at the Fort Worth site?" "Fine. Just the usual client concerns about timeline and budget." She nodded sympathetically and began applying makeup with the same careful attention she'd always given her appearance, unaware that I was studying her reflection in the mirror, looking for signs of guilt or regret or any indication that she understood the magnitude of what she'd done. I saw nothing but contentment. At Smoky Joe's, the four of us fell into our familiar dynamic with the ease of years of practice. The restaurant was crowded with the usual mix of families, couples on dates, and groups of friends catching up over plates of brisket and ribs. We'd been coming here for years, celebrating promotions and birthdays, drowning sorrows after bad days at work, creating the kind of shared history that binds friends together across decades. David held court with stories from the firehouse. A warehouse fire that had taken 6 hours to contain. A teenager who'd gotten his head stuck in a fence. The usual mix of heroism and human stupidity that filled his days as a Dallas Fire Department captain. Jennifer, a labor and delivery nurse at Presbyterian Hospital, countered with sanitized tales from her shifts, her natural storytelling ability making even routine medical situations sound dramatic and compelling. Becky laughed at all the right moments, her hand occasionally brushing David's arm when she reached for her beer or the shared basket of onion rings. I watched them carefully, looking for signs of the intimacy I'd witnessed at the hotel, but they were masters of discretion. To any casual observer, we were just 4 old friends enjoying dinner and conversation. I studied David with new eyes. This man I'd known for 25 years, trying to understand how he could sit across from me talking about work schedules and weekend plans while the taste of my wife was probably still on his lips. He seemed completely at ease, asking about my latest construction projects, complaining about budget cuts at the fire department, sharing bites of his loaded potato with Becky just like he had countless times before. Jennifer was exactly as she'd always been, warm, funny, completely unaware that her husband had spent the afternoon betraying not just my marriage but their friendship. She talked about her patients, her garden, her mother's upcoming visit from San Antonio, creating the comfortable backdrop of normalcy against which my world was quietly ending. "You know what's wild?" I said during a lull in conversation, my voice casual while my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "I heard this story on NPR today about friendship and betrayal, and it really got me thinking." The table went quiet, waiting for me to continue. I could see Becky's hand freeze halfway to her mouth, her fork loaded with coleslaw suspended in midair. "What would you do?" I continued, looking directly at David. "If you found out your best friend was having an affair with your wife? I mean, who would you be madder at, the friend or the spouse?" David took a long sip of his Shiner Bock, his eyes never leaving mine. When he finally answered, his voice carried just the faintest tremor. "Hell, Mike, that's heavy. I reckon. I don't know, man. Both probably. But the friend would cut deeper, you know? Your wife might fall out of love with you, but your best friend? That's supposed to be unconditional." "Interesting take," I said, then turned to my wife. "What about you, Becky? If I was having an affair with Jen, how would you handle it?" Becky's face had gone pale, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "I'd probably want to kill y'all both," she said with a nervous laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "But seriously, I think the betrayal from the friend would hurt worse. At least with your spouse, there might be relationship issues that explain it. But your best friend? That's just pure selfishness." The irony of her words hung in the air like smoke from the restaurant's grills, bitter and inescapable. Jennifer reached across the table to squeeze my hand, her expression concerned. "Why are you asking such dark questions, Mike? You're not having some kind of midlife crisis, are you?" "Just something I heard on the radio," I repeated. "Made me think about loyalty and trust, you know? How well we really know the people closest to us." David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it, then at Becky, and something passed between them so quickly I almost missed it. Almost. "Everything all right?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just work stuff," David said, sliding his phone back into his pocket. But his easy demeanor had shifted, becoming slightly forced, like an actor who'd suddenly forgotten his lines. The rest of dinner passed in a strange, tense atmosphere that only I seemed fully aware of. David and Becky were both trying too hard to act normal, their conversation slightly stilted, their laughter a beat too late. Jennifer remained oblivious to the undercurrents swirling around our table, chatting about weekend plans and her sister's upcoming wedding. When the check came, I insisted on paying despite David's protests. "My treat," I said, pulling out my credit card. "Hell, who knows when we'll all be able to do this again?" Outside the restaurant, We said our goodbyes with the usual promises to get together soon. David clapped me on the shoulder with the same easy affection he'd shown me for 25 years, and for a moment I almost believed that nothing had changed, that I'd imagined the whole afternoon, that my marriage was still intact and my best friend was still the brother I'd chosen rather than the Judas who'd betrayed me. "Good to see you, brother," he said, using the term that had once meant everything to me. "We should catch a Rangers game soon. The season's almost over, and they're actually playing decent ball for once." "You bet," I replied, knowing we never would. The drive home was silent except for the whisper of air conditioning and the distant hum of traffic on Highway 75. Becky stared out the passenger window at the familiar landscape of North Dallas. Strip malls and chain restaurants and subdivisions full of people living lives that probably made sense to them, unlike mine, which had become a puzzle with pieces that no longer fit together. "You seemed a little off tonight," she said as we pulled into our driveway, our house dark except for the porch light we'd left on. "Everything okay?" "Just tired." I lied, the words coming easier now that I'd had practice. Long day. Inside our house. The house we'd bought 3 years ago with dreams of filling it with children who would never exist now. I watched Becky go through her nightly routine with new eyes. She loaded the dishwasher with our dinner plates from the night before, set out her teaching clothes for tomorrow, and brushed her teeth while humming that same slightly off-key tune from the shower. When she climbed into bed beside me, I pretended to be asleep. She settled against her pillow with a contented sigh, probably thinking about David, about their afternoon together, about whatever they'd planned for their next encounter, while I was out of town pretending to inspect construction sites that suddenly seemed less important than the demolition happening in my own home. I lay awake until dawn broke over Richardson, staring at our bedroom ceiling and trying to figure out what came next. Part of me wanted to confront them immediately, to scream and demand explanations and make them face the devastation they'd created. But a larger part felt hollow, like something essential had been carved out and taken away, leaving only empty space where trust and love used to live. By morning, I'd made my decision. "I need to ask you something," I said over breakfast, watching Becky grade papers while she ate Greek yogurt with granola, her red pen marking student errors while hiding her own. She looked up, her green eyes clear and innocent, probably wondering why my voice sounded so strange. "What's up? Are you having an affair?" The question hung between us like a blade waiting to fall. Becky's spoon clattered against her bowl, sending yogurt spattering across a second grader's math worksheet. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish pulled from water and left gasping on dry land. "What? Mike, what are you talking about?" "I found the notebook in your car, Becky. The one with all the dates and times. I know about the hotel meetings. I know about David." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She gripped the edge of our kitchen table, her knuckles white against the wood we'd chosen together at IKEA 3 years ago, back when our biggest decision was whether to get the oak finish or the birch. "How did you?" She stopped herself, but it was too late. The admission was in those 4 words, the confirmation I'd been dreading and hoping against since finding that notebook. "So it's true." I said it as a statement, not a question. "For months, Becky. For months of lying to my face every single day while you planned your next meeting with my best friend." Tears began streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it with the evidence laid out between us like divorce papers waiting to be signed. "Mike, please let me explain." "Explain what?" "How my wife and my best friend decided I didn't matter enough to consider before they started screwing each other behind my back." She flinched at my language, but I was past caring about her comfort. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. We never meant for it to go so far. But it did go that far. It went exactly that far, for 4 months. While I trusted y'all completely and called you every night from hotel rooms to tell you how much I missed you." The truth of it hit her visibly, making her sob harder. I know how terrible this is. But Mike, I do love you. I never stopped loving you. You have a hell of a way of showing it." I stood up from the table, surprised by how calm I sounded when everything inside me was screaming. I want you out of the house. Today. Mike, please, can't we talk about this? Today, Becky. Go stay with your folks, go stay with David, I don't give a damn. But I can't look at you right now without wanting to put my fist through the wall. She nodded through her tears, understanding that this wasn't a negotiation. Within 2 hours, she was gone, taking only a suitcase and leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and 8 years of marriage that felt like they died overnight. I called David that afternoon from my office, staring out at the Dallas skyline while his phone rang. He answered on the first ring, probably hoping it was Becky calling to debrief about our morning confrontation. We need to talk, I said without preamble. Mike, listen, I can explain. No explanation needed. I just want you to know that our friendship is over. 25 years, David. 25 years of brotherhood. And you threw it away for what? Afternoon sex with my wife in cheap hotels. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. Don't contact me again. Don't come to my house. Don't show up at places where I might be. As far as I'm concerned, you don't exist anymore. Mike, please, you have to understand. I hung up while he was still talking, then immediately blocked his number. Some bridges aren't worth repairing once they've been burned to ash. Some friendships don't survive the weight of betrayal, no matter how many years of history they're built on. The divorce process took 4 months to complete, almost exactly as long as their affair had lasted. During that time, Becky moved back in with her parents in Arlington, sleeping in her childhood bedroom surrounded by high school trophies and college pennants, while her marriage disintegrated in family court. I threw myself into work with manic intensity, taking on every project, working late every night, and slowly rebuilding my sense of self-worth through the satisfaction of creating something permanent and honest. Buildings don't lie. Foundations don't cheat. Structural integrity means something in construction, even if it means nothing in marriage. Jennifer called me twice during those months, wanting to understand what had happened, why our tight-knit group of friends had imploded so suddenly. The first time, I told her to ask her husband, then gently but firmly explained that she couldn't be part of my life anymore either. Guilt by association, maybe, but I couldn't separate her from David, and David was a chapter one needed to close forever. The second time she called, she was crying. I found text messages, she said through her tears. Hotel receipts. He's been lying to me for months. Mike, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what was happening. I feel like such a fool. I felt bad for Jennifer. She was collateral damage in David and Becky's selfish choices, but I couldn't comfort her without reopening wounds I was trying to heal. I'm sorry too, Jen. You deserved better than this. We both did, she whispered, then hung up. Through mutual friends, I later heard that Jennifer had kicked David out of their house in Plano. He was staying at some extended stay hotel near the fire station, probably the same kind of anonymous place where he'd betrayed our friendship. The irony was fitting, if not particularly satisfying. The divorce was officially finalized on a gray February morning in downtown Dallas, in a sterile conference room that smelled of old coffee and broken promises. Becky and I signed papers that divided 8 years of shared life into legal documents and financial obligations. Who got the Honda, who kept the wedding china, how to split the proceeds from selling our house in Richardson. She looked pale and thin, like she'd lost weight from stress or guilt or whatever emotion had replaced the contentment I'd seen in her face that night at Smokey Joe's. When our lawyers shook hands and declared our marriage officially dissolved, she started to say something, then stopped herself and just nodded before walking away. We sold the house to a young couple with a toddler who loved the backyard and talked excitedly about the patio chairs we'd never gotten around to buying. I moved into a sleek condo in Deep Ellum, closer to downtown and farther from every memory Becky and I had created together in the suburbs. She found a small apartment near her school in Arlington, probably furnished with pieces from her parents' garage and the accumulated detritus of a life that had imploded. 3 weeks after the divorce was final, My phone rang while I was reviewing blueprints for a new office complex in Richardson. Ironically, only a few miles from the house where I discovered my wife's betrayal. Mike! Becky's voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. Less certain than the confident teacher I'd married. What do you want, Becky? I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need to tell you something important. My stomach clenched with dread. What? I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I sank into my desk chair, staring out at the Dallas skyline without really seeing it, trying to process what she just told me. And you're calling me because? Because I don't know who the father is. The admission came out in a whisper, carrying with it all the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine Becky making this call, probably sitting in her cramped apartment, facing the possibility that her affair had created a life that would complicate everyone's future forever. Jesus, Becky. I need to know, Mike. We need to know. The "we" stung, but I understood what she meant. If there was any chance the child was mine, I had a right to know. More importantly, the child had a right to know who their father was. 2 days later, we sat in a sterile medical clinic in Addison, waiting for DNA test results that would determine whether I had any remaining biological connection to the woman who'd been my whole world for nearly a decade. The waiting room felt like purgatory. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, outdated magazines scattered on plastic tables, the distant sound of other people's lives being changed by lab results and medical decisions. Becky sat 2 chairs away from me, close enough that I could smell her familiar perfume, but far enough that we wouldn't accidentally touch. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes suggesting that sleep had become as elusive for her as it had for me during the worst days of our divorce. How far along? I asked, the first words we'd exchanged since arriving. 12 weeks, she said quietly. I found out last week. The math was straightforward but painful. 12 weeks ago would have been right around the time our divorce was finalized, which meant conception happened during the legal dissolution of our marriage, probably while she was still seeing David and I was trying to rebuild my life in a downtown condo that felt more like a hotel room than a home. When the doctor finally called us into his office, I already knew what he was going to say. Some truths announce themselves before they're spoken, settling into your bones like cold weather that you feel hours before the temperature drops. Mr. Harrison, the doctor said, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality of someone who delivered life-changing news multiple times per day. You are not the father. Becky broke down crying in that sterile office, her sobs echoing off the walls while I sat frozen in my chair. The doctor discreetly left us alone, probably accustomed to these moments of personal devastation playing out in his office between morning appointments and afternoon consultations. I'm sorry, she kept repeating through her tears. Mike, I'm so sorry. But sorry couldn't rebuild trust. Sorry couldn't give me back the sleep I'd lost or the friendship that had been sacrificed on the altar of her choices. Sorry couldn't erase the months of wondering if somewhere inside her was a child that might have been mine. A final connection to the woman I'd loved completely and lost completely. Sorry was just another word that had lost its meaning between us. I drove her back to her apartment in Arlington in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts as familiar Dallas neighborhoods passed by the windows like scenes from someone else's life. When I pulled up to her building, a generic complex that probably housed dozens of people starting over from various personal disasters, she turned to face me one last time. I loved you, she said quietly. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I need you to know that I loved you through all of it. I know you did, I replied, and found that I meant it. That's what makes it so much worse. She nodded and got out of the car, walking toward her apartment building with the careful steps of someone carrying precious cargo that belonged to someone else. I watched her disappear into the lobby, then drove back to my condo in Deep Ellum and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon that tasted like regret and finality. 7 months have passed since I blocked Becky's number and committed to moving forward with my life. I'm dating someone new, Sarah, a landscape architect I met through a mutual friend at a construction industry mixer. She's smart and funny and has never betrayed anyone in her life. We take things slowly, building trust the way I build structures. Carefully, methodically, with attention to every detail of the foundation. Sarah knows about my divorce, though not all the details. She's patient with my trust issues and doesn't push when I need space to process old wounds that occasionally reopen without warning. She's helping me learn that not everyone lies, that some people mean what they say and say what they mean, that love doesn't have to come with the constant anxiety of wondering when it will be taken away. But last week, my mother called with news that shattered the careful peace I'd constructed around my new life like a wrecking ball through a wall I'd thought was solid. I ran into Margaret Patterson at Tom Thumb, Mom said, using Becky's mother's maiden name the way she always did when delivering serious news. We got to talking, and she told me about the baby. I had to sit down, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. She came early, honey. The little girl. She has Down syndrome. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my downtown condo feel like it was closing in around me. I gripped the phone tighter, as if that could somehow make the news less devastating. Becky's struggling, Mom continued, her voice heavy with the kind of sympathy that comes from watching other people's children suffer. Raising her alone, living with her folks again. Margaret says she barely leaves the house anymore, just stays in her old bedroom with the baby. After I hung up, I sat in my living room staring out at the Dallas skyline. The same view I'd had from countless office buildings I'd helped construct. The same city where I'd fallen in love, gotten married, discovered betrayal, and tried to rebuild my life from the ground up. I thought about choices and consequences, about love and loss, about the weight of betrayal and the unexpected price of revenge. I thought about a little girl I'd never meet, born into a world complicated by her mother's mistakes and her biological father's apparent abandonment. According to Mom's conversation with Margaret, David had disappeared completely once the DNA results confirmed his paternity. No child support, no contact, no acknowledgement that his affair had created a life that would need decades of specialized care and unconditional love. I thought about David, the man who'd been my brother in every way except blood, now revealed as someone who could walk away from his own child because she wasn't perfect, because she represented consequences he didn't want to face. The David I'd grown up with would have been horrified by the man he'd become, but maybe I'd never really known him at all. Maybe the capacity for that kind of cruelty had always been there, hidden beneath the easy charm and fraternal loyalty I'd trusted for 25 years. Most of all, I thought about Becky, the woman who'd once been my whole world, now alone with a special needs child in her childhood bedroom, living with the consequences of choices that had seemed so reasonable in hotel rooms and stolen afternoons. The affair that was supposed to bring excitement and passion to her life had instead brought isolation and overwhelming responsibility. There's no satisfaction in this ending, no sense that justice has been served or that the universe has somehow balanced its scales. Just the quiet recognition that betrayal creates ripples that extend far beyond the original splash, touching lives in ways that can't be predicted or controlled, creating victims who never chose to be part of the story. I still love her. Despite everything, the lies, the systematic deception, the 4 months of planning secret meetings while I called her from lonely hotel rooms. Some part of me will probably always love the woman who used to curl up next to me on Sunday mornings and plan out our future over coffee and the Dallas Morning News. That love sits alongside my anger like an uncomfortable roommate, neither emotion strong enough to evict the other. The knowledge that she's struggling, that she's facing the enormous challenge of raising a special needs child alone while David, the man she chose over me, has abandoned them both, creates a complicated mixture of vindication and sorrow that I'm still learning to navigate. Sarah understands, mostly. She knows I have complicated feelings about my ex-wife, though I haven't told her about the baby or the Down syndrome diagnosis. She's patient when I get distant for no apparent reason, when something triggers a memory that sends me spiraling into the past like a man falling down a well he thought he'd filled in. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never found that notebook, if I'd remained blissfully ignorant while my wife and best friend conducted their affair behind my back. Would it have burned itself out naturally, the way most affairs apparently do? Would they have eventually confessed, overwhelmed by guilt and the weight of deception? Or would I have lived the rest of my life as an unknowing cuckold, raising David's daughter while my wife and best friend shared secret smiles across dinner tables at Smokey Joe's? There's no way to know and no point in wondering. The only choice is to move forward, building something new from the wreckage of what came before. It's what I do for a living, after all. Tear down structures that are no longer safe or functional and construct something stronger in their place, something designed to last. I'm getting there one day at a time, one choice at a time, one blueprint at a time. And if I've learned anything from this whole devastating experience, it's that the only person you can truly count on not to betray you is yourself. Everything else, love, friendship, marriage, trust, requires a leap of faith that might end with you lying broken at the bottom of a cliff, but might also lead to something beautiful and permanent and true. The rest is just hope, faith, and very careful engineering. In Dallas, like everywhere else, that's sometimes enough. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time out. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.